Hola friends, welcome to the Medicine, Marriage, and Money YouTube channel, the only channel for physicians who want to achieve marital interdependence and financial freedom together. On this channel, you will learn how to show up as the best version of yourself so that you can love intentionally and build a more financially savvy relationship with your spouse. And I am your host, a physician mom, a doctor's wife, a Gottman leader, a certified life and marriage coach, Dr. Kate Mangona. Welcome. Bienvenidos.
I think the first time that we struggled was when we went off to college. We actually went to different colleges. We didn't know sort of how to handle that. And we did break up for a period of time because we decided, well, maybe we should date other people. We did, but it was always him for me. And I was always her for him, and we always just knew even though we dated other people, I do think that was actually very healthy for us to date other people because we really were just high school sweethearts and no one else had we dated really. So it was healthy and we realized we didn't want anyone else. So
Thank you so much for joining me today, friends, sweet friends, on another episode of Medicine, Marriage, and Money. Today, we have with us Dr. Laura Fortner. She is a Board Certified OBGYN. She is a speaker and author and the CEO of Med Mal Coach. You wouldn't believe it, but she has been together with her farmer spouse for 36 years and married for 27, and she only looks 27 years old. She has 4 children. 2 boys, aged 23 and 21, 2 girls, aged 19 and 13, 3 Goldendoodles, lots of animals as they live on a farm. They grow chickens for Chick-fil-A, have grass-fed Jersey dairy cows. And we're going to go over my favorite topics today of falling back in love and the obstacles and struggles you go through as a couple when one of the people in your relationship is struggling. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here. I love that I get to talk about this today. This is like, this stuff right here is transformational for people. And I feel like we have had ups and downs all the way around. And still with my high school sweetheart today and more in love with him than I was way back then. So I'm so excited to be here and thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. And let me just ask you this. So did you get married right out of high school?
No. So we were high school sweethearts. We started dating our junior year and we did not get married until until I graduated from med school. So about 10 years later, we got married.
And then you started having kids in residency?
Yeah. So I had my first one at the age of 30. I actually went into labor on my 30th birthday. I was on call delivering babies and it was about 7 p.m. And I was like, someone needs to check me because I think I'm having a baby. And I was 7 centimeters and they were like, okay. You're going to have a baby too on this shift.
Oh my God. Okay. What was your gestational age at that point?
I was 38 weeks.
Okay.
So it was a couple weeks early. And I knew it because he had, the person that did the call schedule put me on call on my 30th birthday. I was like, dude, you should not do that. This is bad right now because I almost knew it. And it did. It happened. So, but luckily I had him a few hours after midnight. So he has his own birthday.
Okay. Amazing. Amazing. Okay. Let's back up a little bit then. So tell me, when did you first meet your spouse and how did you fall in love?
Yeah. So the first encounter I had with him was in 8th grade and we were in a study hall and I fell asleep. We were allowed to sleep back then. I don't know if they're allowed to do that back then, but I was totally and utterly asleep and he had tied my shoelaces to my desk.
Oh.
Yeah. And I got up and of course tripped. And that's how I met him, or that's how I really talk to him at that point. I was annoyed with him.
Like, did you hurt yourself? You could injure yourself.
I didn't injure myself, but I was very annoyed with him at that time and did not like him.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't like him either. Okay, so then how did you fall in love?
So fast forward, and this is going to sound sort of tradition or like, whatever, like people say cliche. It's going to sound cliche, right? But at the beginning of our junior year, he asked me out. I wanted to go out with him. He was the quarterback on the football team. All the people loved him. I was kind of the nerdy book person. And so he asked me out. We went to a movie and that was it. The rest was history.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, a couple of years later, 8th, 9th, 10th. Yeah. 11th grade. So like 3 years later.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the struggles you encountered. And I would even want to know specifically, like, if you had to list like your 1, 2, or 3 major struggles of your entire 36 years with him, what were those? What were those struggles? And then how did you move through them? I think this is really important for people to realize, because sometimes people have a struggle and they think, oh, well, we need a divorce. They have a struggle like, oh, did I marry the right person? Or we just get so angry about it and defensive. And yeah, 36 years. So I think you have a lot of wisdom to share. I mean, no.
I have so many times, but I think the first time that we struggled was when we went off to college. We actually went to different colleges. We didn't know sort of how to handle that. And we did break up for a period of time because we decided, well, maybe we should date other people. We did, but it was always him for me. And I was always her for him, and we always just knew even though we dated other people, I do think that was actually very healthy for us to date other people, because we really were just high school sweethearts and no one else had we dated really. So it was healthy and we realized we didn't want anyone else. So that was the start of something. And then I think probably the next sort of major transition for us being in medicine was that he is not medical. And, when I went to get a job, we started having kids. He decided to be a stay-at-home dad. That was really a struggle for him and me. I mean, I loved the fact that he was the best stay-at-home dad, by the way, the best cook. He always had the house tidied up. He had the kids all crazy, really good. But he was struggling deep inside for his own purpose. And he felt, that he should provide in some way. And so it was a struggle for us during that time period. And that's when we bought a farm and he started farming. So, and that kind of resolved that. But during those times, I remember some struggle, but I will be honest with you, Kate, that most of the stuff was pretty minor until I had an issue, when I was practicing, I then had a medical malpractice case that I was very emotionally distraught by. Yeah. And I didn't realize the toll it was going to take. And I think what happens when one partner struggles, you start to hide and isolate yourself, even with your partner. Or you think that they don't understand you, even if it's not med mal, but it's something else. You think your partner has no idea what you're going through, right? That probably comes up a lot with what you do.
Yeah.
And that's really what was going on with us when I was going through this case, because he was not in medicine. So he didn't understand. I kept saying he didn't understand. And so I would push him away. He would push me away. It was sort of this really big turmoil, to the point then after a year, 2 years, 3 years went by. I mean, this case went on and on and on for me, that there was a point where every little thing bothered me about him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like everything he said, everything he did, everything was wrong.
Yes. And he couldn't do anything right.
Yeah.
And down to, just little things like chewing with his food. Like, I'm just pointing this out for your listeners. Like,
Normal.
This is what happens. And there was a point where I was like, maybe we should be done with this. Maybe we should separate. Maybe we're not meant for each other, and it got really hard. I wanted something that I thought he wasn't giving me. I wanted, a hug, snuggling, love, caring. I wanted those things, and he wasn't delivering those things. But if you really think about what was going on with our entire relationship, that's not him. Like, he never did it.
That's not how he normally showed his love.
Right. He always showed it with just his servanthood. He was always a peaceful, patient, he is a peaceful, patient guy, and he's just laid back, and he's a secure source of energy. Like, he's just so secure, and you feel so safe with him. He has that gift. And so I just wasn't paying attention to it at the time. I thought I was wanting something more and different. And it caused a lot of angst during that time. For sure.
How long did that last? And I think this is important to know for people who might be in the middle of things.
Yeah, I think it probably went on for a couple of years. I mean, at first you ignore it. At first you just get involved. I mean, we had 4 little ones at the time. I mean, it was kind of crazy in sports and all these things. And so we were running around too, besides working, both of us. I mean, he was a full-time farmer, which is 24/7 job. And I'm an OBGYN. And so it was crazy. And so we really sort of ignored it, maybe, right? Okay. For a while. And then when it would get to a head, we would fight about it. And we were a couple that never really fought before. And people would comment, like, you're fighting now. Like, that's odd, right? Like, we just were doing things that wasn't us before. And it was because I was going through something, and I wasn't blaming him, but I was blaming him for not knowing how to help me.
Yeah.
And support me through it.
So how did you get out of it?
So, well, I think some of it was coaching, getting coached, to be honest, but also like knowing I finally figured out that it was my responsibility. If I wanted to change, if I wanted our relationship to change, I needed to do something to make that change. Okay. And so I started little things. And one of the little things that I started for myself, just because I wanted it, is I started to make him hug me every morning. And that we hadn't done that in years. I mean, I don't know when the last time that was. I mean, I know he thought this was odd the first day I did it. He was like, what is going on? Right. And I just kept doing it and doing it every day now. It's every day now. It's like,
what did you say? How did you ask for that?
I did say, can I have a hug? And his response was odd, but I did it anyway. And then I decided the next day, I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to do it, because that human touch transforms everything. I mean, here's the thing. When you struggle, you isolate and hide from each other, and then you stop touching each other, which is really a downfall, in my opinion. I mean, when I started hugging him again, I started feeling him again.
Oh, yeah, I can totally get it. I mean, we're humans. We procreate, right? Like, we touch each other. That's like how intensified, whatever that means to you. I feel like for most people, it's a very intimate to be able to just touch your partner.
Yeah. And what I decided is the very thing that I didn't want to do, I was going to do, meaning that if I got mad at him, I was just going to go hug him. Like, that's the last thing you want to do right? And that's all I started to do. And it started slowly to transform who we were with each other then.
Yes.
It was incredible what it did. And it was just this tiniest thing.
I'm going to repeat that. Okay. So when you're mad at your spouse, can you somehow go touch them, hold their hand, hug them, put your hand on their shoulder? Can you do that when you're mad? Yes. The answer is yes. Laura, Dr. Fortner is telling us we can.
Yeah. Because, it you know what it does? It grounds you to understanding they're human and we're all flawed.
Yep.
It puts you in the present and it grounds you to that. And then I could see that he is doing the best he could. Like, that's what ended up happening, because when I went through this case and then it went to trial and things, and one of the biggest explosions or problems that we had is he came to one day of the trial, or maybe a day and a half, and he told me he couldn't. It would bring tears to my eyes how that made me feel, but he couldn't sit in there anymore. Like, he couldn't handle it himself to be in that courtroom. And that really bothered me. And that's when I really started blaming him for not supporting me. And it's just what happened with the hug was I could recognize that he's human too. Yeah. And he couldn't witness some of the things that were being said, and he was doing the best he could. And once that came back around, we started getting back on the same page.
Right. Once you kind of started realizing like it was just really intense for him, like to hear the proceedings. And how many days was it?
It was 3 weeks, the trial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every day?
What's that?
Present every day?
Oh, yeah. I had to be present every day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and this is normal how cases go with physicians. Usually they're 2 to 3 weeks. So aside from that, like, the emotional component to that is very traumatic for physicians sitting in the room. But then if you have a significant other, even if they're in medicine, it's going to be traumatic for them too. And even if they're not, for sure, like they go through their own thing. And the unfortunate part of being in a med mal case is physicians can start to change their behavior based on what is, when this stuff happens, because we do all these types of things when this stuff happens. We start overeating, we start over drinking, we start, we do all these things to buffer, right? We start watching Netflix, we start zoning out, we stop being present with our family. There's so many things that we start to do, and it's actually normal sort of human nature when it's a deeply personal event to you and you feel like, that this doesn't happen to anybody. But in the real world of physicians, it happens to a lot of us, and most of us. High risk specialties happens to a lot of us. So I just want to point that out, because what happens is then your significant other, your spouse, doesn't understand why you're changing. And it really was me that was the problem. Kate, it wasn't him. He'd always been the same guy. But I was the one going through it. And when we go through deeply personal events that are traumatic to us, that we're struggling, are the obstacles that we have, we change. And so, you have to think, well, your significant other is not going through the same thing. So they're not, in that same space. And I don't know, that hug just grounded me, recognized him as a human, as flawed, like we all are. And he was always here. And I just didn't tap into it.
And as I listened to you tell this story and kind of like that struggle that lasted a few years, right? Because you were kind of dealing with a lot of traumatic emotional things, and your husband just being the same and allowing everything to happen around him. I just kind of wonder, what if he would have not received that? Like, your actions and your attitudes, you kind of changed because of this probably sadness, grief you're going through, or whatever about the med mal case you're in. But he was still there for you. Like, it sounds to me like he was still ready to receive when you figured out where your head needed to be, when you got some coaching. Would you say that he had changed too? Because, after a few years of being on the recipient, of everything you were going through and how that was affecting your relationship, I just wonder what he was actually going through too, watching you try to deal with these emotions. Did you ever talk to him about that or discuss that?
We did, actually. And he was hurting too. He was having, issues of his thoughts went to what is going to happen with that. He had a lot of thoughts around this too, and feelings and emotional pain too. But of course, because I was hiding, he was hiding, and none of us were talking about it. And we did get to the point of almost blaming each other for a while of the whole scenario, and that. And this is what we oftentimes do. We often think if we're going to change our circumstance, which is maybe with the spouse or, a divorce or whatever, we think it's going to be better over here. And it's not. It's not. I mean, it's a fallacy of how our human brains, it's sort of a thaw in our human brains. I think it's like a program problem where we think over here is going to be better than here, and it just is not. And so when I figured that out, and I just figured out how to find a way back to him, that's when we started to grow. Now it wasn't always easy, right? And you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that's normal, right? But I think now to where we are, I don't want to ever go back that way. I still do the hug every morning. I feel like we have had just so much more of a connection than we ever had, even, before, or the times when, our kids were so crazy, we were going everywhere and all that stuff. Like, that connection now is just stronger than it's ever been.
So how do you get that? Because I know you're like, this was probably a slow process of falling back in love or deeply in love or even more connected. What are some other things you guys did, or maybe you initiated besides the hug, in order to fall back in love with somebody whose chewing bothered you, like breathing, everything,
I know, right? So it started with the hug, and then it started with going out, like doing mini trips. So when you're married to a farmer, it's really hard to get away. You have animals, you have things. Now, so we made a commitment to hire somebody so that we could do these mini trips of where we take weekends away. So we started going away on weekends at the spur of the moment, or just even the day thing. Like today, we're going away today. We're going to a Cleveland Indians game, which is kind of funny, but it's just a little thing, but it's not really, to be honest with you, because it's like, we need to do this for ourselves. And we started doing that, making commitment. Now, I will tell you that was hard for me. I'm sort of like a business-minded worker. I would work constantly if you let me. And so it wasn't easy for me. And I know it wasn't easy for him either, because he felt like obligated to be here because he's got these live animals that he's got to keep alive, and he wants to feed and water and make sure they're well. And he has to do hay. He has to do all these things. So, but
you have a farm hand.
The farm hand helps, and that changed our life. And he made a commitment to do that for our relationship because he knew we needed to get away.
And I'm sure it's not easy, right, to find somebody you trust and is going to take care of your farm the way you would take care of it. I mean, I hear people say this all the time. Like, how do you find this help? Like, I don't trust anybody. I've got to do everything myself. And my personal rule is that, hey, if they can do it 70 to 80% as good as you, probably worth it.
That's what I keep saying to him, because he will complain sometimes. but we just recently went on a whole week vacation to the beach, and the farmhand was here, and it worked out fine. So, it's sanity, it's everything wrapped up, and but I will say that that's also intentional too, just making time for each other, because most of us don't do that. Right. We're just sort of living without intentionality.
Yes. Make time for the relationship, right? We always make time for our career. Like you said, we could all be working, like, especially physicians. I feel like we're so type A, or any, professionals really, like even people in the corporate world, lawyers, like we're so go get it, like high achievers. We love that productivity. We tire worth, which, we shouldn't, but we love that. We love that dopamine rush, and being able to relax and disconnect and really work on a relationship in those moments might feel uncomfortable at first, but in the long run, and for your eventual mental sanity, when things do slow down, or when things like what you went through, when you do have a medical malpractice lawsuit, or something happens to one of your patients, you have a complication, I miss a finding on a radiology exam, like at the end of the day, it's your relationships that will tie you through.
Yeah.
That will bring you through darkness back into the light. The relationship with yourself, the relationship with your spouse, with your coworkers. And it's so easy to ignore and deny those in the beginning.
And I just want to point out too, I keep going back to that hug, but what happened is I started to think differently about my husband, and thinking is what got me back to, this is the man that I love. I want to spend the rest of my life with, and during those times, I couldn't even say that. It was the farthest thing from my thinking at the time.
Yeah.
And I just want to point that out, because I think that the touch grounds you back to thinking in a way that you can get back to each other. Now, I get, my husband was a willing participant, right? Eventually. In the beginning, he wasn't, though. I will say in the beginning, he was still stubborn, sort of, and well, this hug, but eventually he did come around, obviously. So but it is all relationship. At the end of the day, it's relationships, and just to think of, it's just a normal tendency for us to want to hide and isolate ourselves when we have bad things happening to us and we have some emotional pain. But the worst thing we could do is turn ourselves against the relationships we have in our life.
Absolutely. And so are you working? How much are you still working?
Yeah, so I'm doing about 6 OB hospitalist shifts a month. But I also coach physicians through medical malpractice. And I do have a heart for that from what I went through. And it has transformed me. I know I just love helping physicians in that way, because I think we don't know. It's hard to navigate. It's hard to navigate with all of our personal relationships, with our work, with, the behaviors that change in us are so drastic. A lot of the time we lose our confidence during those times. So I do that as well.
And so it's would you say you kind of split, that's a great balance. You found yourself a really good balance where you kind of coach, do your OB hospitalist work, and then still have time to spend with your kids and your.
Yeah. I love it. And I've figured out how to, really schedule my own time instead of someone telling me when to come in and when not to come in. I get to pick that. And that's beautiful, actually.
Yeah. And you mentioned when you found coaching, right? When you started, I'm wondering, was that tied to the hug you started? And when was the moment that you decided, did you decide, or did you fall into it, or was it by accident? Tell me about when you decided you were going to change, going back to your side. I decided he was the same person. I was in this period for a few years, and I decided it was really up to me. I was going to start to hug him. When did you figure that out? And how did you seek out the help you needed? And why did you choose coaching, over counseling or therapy? Tell me more about that time in your life, and when was that?
Yeah. So I didn't, so my trial lasted 3 weeks, and after the trial, I really did have post-traumatic like stress. And so I went and got something called EMDR, which is sort of a memory reconsolidation technique. And then, it did help. It did tremendously help me. And then there was like sort of a lull, and I decided to do coaching. I did go to a therapist a couple of times, but the thing, for me was I was worried about the questions that they asked me on hospital applications. I was worried about like what my boards were going to ask me that I was seeing a therapist. So I just kind of didn't do that anymore. And I went the coaching route because of that. And once I started just a few sessions in with a coach, I realized that this was all me. Like it was my responsibility. If I wanted to change the relationship, I had to change myself, and I had to do something about it. And we weren't particularly talking about couples or like my relationship with my husband, but we were talking about other things, but it just clicked in me that that's what I needed to do. And so it did coincide with coaching. Okay. And I was getting certified as a coach just as selfishly to become a better person and to get over my med mal is all I was doing. I wasn't planning on doing a business after that or anything like that, but and that's what really helped my relationship with my husband. I started doing it then. And then it's just transformed since that point. But yeah. And I think what I love about coaching is it's forward focused. It's like we don't dwell in the past. Like the past is a past. There is acceptance in that happened to you. But in order for you to get beyond it, you really want to, I really believe in coaching because coaching gets you that forward focus of what you can do now to move forward and move past it. Whereas therapy, I felt like they just wanted to talk about what had happened. And it's like, I accept it, but like, I don't need to dwell on it, right? I want to have solution. I wanted to move forward and past it to have joy back in medicine, love my job again, and love my husband again.
I feel like this is I feel like a lot of physicians feel this way. Like therapy, of course, it's amazing and great in its own way. And you can have both of them and you can use them differently in a symbiotic relationship. But I get what you're saying because I recently had a very traumatic work experience, and a lot of people come talk to me and ask me, I repeated this situation like 20 or 30 times, and people are like, okay, how are you feeling? Okay, let's talk about it. And it's like at a point, I'm just like, okay, what's next? Like, how do we go forward? Let's learn from this.
Well, the thing is about memory, the memories in our brain and traumatic experiences is they're very malleable. And here's the issue. And the neuroscience is there. There's like 12 years of neuroscience about memory reconsolidation. I just want to bring this up because this is really important in what we're specifically talking about. If you continue, and even if you're thinking about divorce and you had a big fight, and if you continue to rehash the same moment over and over negatively, you change the traumatic experience that you had, that memory, you change it more negative. It's like our memories, when we think about what happens, like we think about a fight with our husband, we bring that memory up. We actually reconsolidate that memory more negatively when we continue to rehash it and get angry. And so these memories are emotionally charged. And that's one component of the memory. There's 4 different components, but like, that's what I help physicians do in the med mal world and in the complication world, in the adverse event world, where I help them change the emotional part of that memory, because that's what the problem is usually with us as human beings. And so I just want to bring this up because us, by continuing to talk about the same thing over and over and over, especially negatively, actually affects us and makes it worse. Yes. This is why my thing went on for years, because I kept doing that. And the forward focus is yes, there is some goodness in like sharing it once or a couple times. There's some healing in that, but then it's time to move on and help grow from it and learn from it and be better from it, whatever happens.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. This was so amazing. I just love hearing about how, couples do really reach dark places sometimes, or just like places where you're like, they'll never understand me. They'll never get it. And then you know what? Sometimes that's okay. We're both human and we don't completely understand everybody's perspective. And of course, your husband's never going to be a physician and never going to go through what you went through. But when you look at him in this different light, you spin the story a different way of him not just like not showing up to the courtroom didn't mean he didn't support you, didn't love you. It just meant like his emotional capacity wasn't there, and he didn't want to create these stories. Like he knows he probably can't explain it, but
Right.
yeah, it's like
You're so right. It's the spinning of the story, and you can choose to spin it, which you get the choice, right? And when you can get to the belief and the spinning of this is just transform me into who I am today, and I have chosen to be on this path with my husband, and we are coming together and working out, having intention around the relationship and doing these things, it is possible for anybody, even if they're in the darkest times, because I thought I was in the deepest pit.
Yeah. I love this. Anybody can fall back in love. It's a choice. You may not want to, but if you want to, follow these steps from Dr. Laura Fortner. Every day, and spend more time with them intentionally. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Make sure you just touch them. Just even an arm, just a brace, just like a brush up against him. Like you don't even have to. I mean, now he gets really mad at me, sort of annoyed, because I'm going to tell you a little too TMI, but like when we go to bed, I like want to be like my back against his back, because we both sleep on our sides, right? So I want his back against my back, and I think he tolerates it, but I'm like, I just want to touch you, and then I'll fall off to sleep, and then we can, be divided. But
no, I used to, that is not TMI, just so you know, for Medicine, Marriage, and Money. I read this article when Victor and I were first married that it said like, you have to have 27 points of contact when you fall asleep. And then, no, it's just kind of just one of, these crazy magazine articles. The couples who stay in love have 27 points of contact. And I think if you're back to back, I think that's probably 27 points of contact. You can name the different muscle groups or whatever. And then you fall asleep and then you get your own space. I personally get really hot at night. I don't want to be touching another human heater, but like that initial cuddle when you're falling asleep. Yeah.
Yeah. I go. Yeah, it is funny. But like, yeah, it is. It's all good. But I think that the touch is what got me back to where we are today. And it was me having to change. And those years when this was going on, I was waiting for him to do something.
Yes.
That's not going to work.
Everyone's always waiting for them, him, her to do something. And it sounds like coaching really empowered you to take the decision back, to like take the chess game and put it in your favor, Yep.
Yeah. It did. It just helped. You know what it was? And this is really sort of, for me, I was sort of acting like a victim. I was acting like a victim. Like it was, I'm being, like woe is me kind of thing. And I was waiting for him. And what I realized is no, like if I want this to work, I have to change too. And I took the responsibility back. But what happened in the interim is like, it's not that I took the whole responsibility, because he started to slowly come to.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Coaching opens your eyes to realization where you're victimizing yourself that you might actually not realize before you talk to that other human who's bouncing your reflection, your thoughts back onto you like reflections.
Yeah.
Well, this was amazing, Dr. Fortner. Is there anything else we didn't cover? We didn't really touch on finances, but that's totally okay. We got into a lot of more other juices.
Yeah, I will. Let me just bring this up because mostly probably medicine people are listening to this, right? Docs and things. And I want to bring this up because the finance part of med mal and what happens with our thinking is so profound. And we usually when we get sued, or if we have a adverse event or a bad case and we're worried about getting sued, most of our thoughts go to, is my career going to end? How am I going to make a living? My license is going to be revoked. I'm not going to be able to practice. These are very common. And this is where I went into that fear mode as well. I mean, I did the same thing that we all do. And that finance thing, we worry so much. We carry around that burden. And for me at the time, I was the breadwinner when this initially started. Now my case went on for a decade, but most people, it's only about 4 to 5 years, but still only. It does really do something to our thoughts and our and how we think about our finances. It is not true, though. I want to actually give medical people that are listening to this some security in the fact that just by getting sued has no meaning that you're going to lose your license or lose your career. And in fact, it's very rare that happens. But I understand you. I know that you're going down that rabbit hole. And I just want to reassure you that it's not, even if something is on the MPDB that you got sued and there was a settlement, you're not going to lose your license, and you're not going to, it just is so rare that happens.
What's that? NPDB?
National Practitioner Data Bank.
So
okay. Even if you have a lawsuit against you and it gets reported to that, most of us start conjuring up these theories in our minds that we're not going to get credentialed at a hospital. We're not going to be able to practice and things. And I want to reassure you that's not true. Okay. It's just not true. Yeah. And if you want more information, you can always find me, but I want to encourage docs that it's normal thinking process for you to think this way. But I also want you to evaluate, the problem is, as physicians, no one's talking about med mal and finance and what's happening there. And so I just want to put it out there that it's blatantly not true what your brain does to you with looking at it this way. Yeah.
Our brain lies, right? Our brain lies and takes us to dark places. And somebody like you who's been through this, who's been there, can really help lift you back up. So where can people find you?
Yeah, you can just go to my website, themedmalcoach.com. Or you can always find me on social media, just Dr. Laura Fortner. You can find me there as well. Message me. I'm happy to talk to anybody or help them out. So thanks.
And we'll have all that in the show notes. So thank you so much. This was so fun. And I just imagining you sitting on your farm outside your window right now. It's just like, it's not what I have here in Dallas. So
yeah. We have cute little baby calves right now in the barns and feeding them. It is cute. We do have a farm stay too, an Airbnb farm stay. If anybody wants to come stay on our farm. Yeah.
I could totally link that in the comments too.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Laura.
Okay. All right.
An amazing episode by Dr. Laura Fortner. Oh my gosh. I have so many take-home points. Let me just give you 6. 1, when you are mad at your spouse, touch them. And not in a crazy, ridiculous way, but can you hold their hand as you argue? I will tell you, my husband does that with me. When I'm arguing with him and I want to pull away, he holds my hand. You know what? It makes us feel more connected. We are all human. We are all flawed. I know it's going to feel uncomfortable. Can you touch them in some way, somehow? Give that hug. It will make a difference. Number 2, little things can make a huge impact, right? So the one hug every day in the morning that lasts 3 seconds, 6 seconds can change your relationship, can enhance the love. Huge little things. Cuddling before you go to sleep, even if it's for less than a minute, could reignite those feelings of, I know this person. I feel this person. 3, make time for your relationship. Make this a priority. Prioritize making time to spend with your spouse every week for a good chunk of time, at least an hour or 2, if not 3. Time helps. Yes, you need to be in the right headspace. But if you don't make the time, you'll never get there. Number 4, coaching empowers you to take back ownership and responsibility for the status of your relationship. When you're waiting for them to change, when you're waiting for them to make the right move, it might never happen. If you take responsibility, you can make it happen now. 5, rehashing the same negative story in a negative way over and over again creates even more negative emotions. This is neuroscience. This has been studied. If you tell a story the same story in a more positive light, right? And we've had examples of this, right? You've got twins from the same family. One turns out a criminal, one turns out a lawyer. Right? Why? And they'll tell you the same reasons, right? Because this was my childhood. One of them took the positives and spun it, ran with it. One of them took the negatives and got buried in it. Then number 6, if you're in a med mal situation, medical malpractice suit, it is not the end of the world. It's normal to think that, but it is very rare you will lose your license. You will most likely not lose your license. You will most likely continue to practice medicine. It will be okay. And I'm sending you so much love to you and your family. Until next time, my sweet friends. If you are finding the concepts I teach in these episodes useful and want more in-depth and personalized support for your relationship, consider this your invitation to join me in creating the most connected and intimate relationship with your spouse that you could dream of. Go to www.medicinemarriageandmoney.com right now and download my 18-page medical marriage survival guide and workbook at no cost to you. I also have a 6-day marriage challenge, which goes over the 6 predictors of divorce at no cost to you. These have been known to decrease fighting, rumination, and grudges between you and your loved one. If you want to take it a step farther, really enhance the joy and connection in the most intimate relationship in your life, sign up for my 8-week Making Marriage Work program today at medicinemarriageandmoney.com. Thanks for leaving us a stellar review, subscribing, and sharing with your friends on social media. You have the power to improve someone else's life and marriage simply by sharing this episode. Much love to you and your spouse. You're exactly where you need to be in this moment. Adios, my friends. The content of this episode is not intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or financial advice. The opinions provided on this episode are those of myself or the invited guest alone. They do not represent the opinions of any particular institution. Always seek the advice of your physician or financial advisor with any questions you may have of a medical condition or financial plan. This is for your entertainment only.